YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, back in Total War Warhammer, bringing you another online battle. It is going to be some Dwarfs versus Vampires today. He picked Vampires. I wanted to pick Dwarfs just so I could go with an underdog faction just for fun. Had no idea what he was going to pick as the Vampires. I'm not the biggest fan of the army he picked here, but, I mean, just about anything, to be honest, could be dangerous versus the Dwarves if it's used right. From the Vampires, that is. But, I mean, the Dwarves did get a little bit better in this patch. Up front, he's got a bunch of skeleton spearmen, which definitely not the right choice in the sense that the Dwarves don't have any large. So I know he was probably bringing them intended as a meat shield. The better choice here is these Graveguard with great weapons. They're going to do very well versus Dwarf infantry. Supporting the skeletons, though, are Crypt Horrors, so that, again, can be potentially useful. Out on the flank, he's got a Blood Knight, and it is supported by a White King. And there's the White King there, so again, plenty of mobility there, and a Blood Knight's pretty strong. He put Manfred on the Zombie Dragon. Hellsteed probably would have been just about as well and saved some money, but I mean, whatever, Zombie Dragon, and he's got some Vargeist, so I like the flying units. He can try and get behind my lines. Crypt Horrors are definitely a good choice in terms of getting in and causing damage, and so are Graveguard, so he's definitely got some potential. I brought a cannon to potentially counter fast-moving units or large units, and my cannons already successfully killed a slew of Blood Knights there with a single hit. Cannons are very effective versus cavalry if they're able to get shots. This ends up kind of scaring my opponent into charging my line, and he's just going to come straight at me. I've got 4 Dwarf Warriors with great weapons up front, 4 Dwarf Warriors in the back, 2 Quarrelers, 2 Thanes. I do have the healing potions with them. I've got a Runesmith with all the different stuff turned on, so he's buffing the attack and defense of my army. And I've got Thorgrim Grudgebearer up front because of the magical damage that he imbues. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to see how this goes. I continue to fire at the Blood Knights even after they enter combat because I want all the cannon kills I can get on them. And you can see that I am successfully bringing some down. His army approaches. And obviously with me having the range superiority, it's going to force him to want to just charge in because he's vampires. When you're a vampire, that's what you do. And I expect that his flying units are coming straight for my ranged units. So I pulled my Quarrelers further back from the main line so that I could try and separate them from this nasty charge that's about to take place. You can see my miners pitching the blasting charges up front, slowing down their charges. I've got heroes up front too, so I'm trying to save my Dwarf Warriors with great weapons from the fury of the charge. And once his Vargeist hit the ground, I'm going to swamp them with infantry. Fortunately, again, Quarrelers are a fairly robust unit. So they will hold out momentarily while I can swing in support. My Thane is going to be supporting my infantry, which can otherwise get overwhelmed. So you can see here that he's going to be doing some cool stuff. You can see the effects of my Runesmith. They actually have a pretty big impact. You can see that the melee defense quite high, but the Crypt Horrors poisoning my men down to 0 melee attack. And that's with the Runesmith close enough to buff my guys. So you can see why Crypt Horrors are so dangerous. My men, other than Thorgrim, literally have no attack versus the Crypt Horrors because the poison is just that potent and Dwarf attack is just that low. So that's one of the challenges you're gonna face. You can see that some of my melee attack is back. Now, actually, it may have been like Soul Blight or something that he was using. I didn't catch the magic, but the Crypt Horrors do poison. And yeah, it was an upgraded Soul Blight is what he was using on me. Interesting. Yeah, it definitely impacted my stats. But my guys are under the effects of poison. His Vargeist pulled away from my Quarrelers because they were being attacked by infantry, but this is just allowing them to be shot by Quarrelers, and Manfred decides to try and do a rear charge, but the morale of Dwarves is usually a little bit too hard to break from just, a simple rear charge. This fight out on the flank where his White King's at rages on. He continues to try and bring down my Quarrelers, but I've got Dwarf Warriors swamping in. So you can see my Quarrelers continue to fire. I'm getting great shots. His Vargeist are melting away. His Blood Knights have been attacked by my cannons consistently to the point where they're almost gone. His White King is somewhat countered over here by my Thane, who can help tank out extra damage and cause the damage. So his Graveguard with great weapons doing very well, but again, my Thane is going to slow them down considerably. And then same thing over here. His Graveguard with great weapons are going to be fighting Curse of Years here, so that's what got used earlier, destroying my melee attack. So pretty neat to see the Vampires using von Karstein's magic to not just try and Spirit Leech and stuff like that, but at the same time, the Dwarves here are going to be very resilient, and his Vampires are starting to lose numbers. And because he hasn't dealt with my skirmish units, he's going to continually be reminded of it. See here, some of his guys are crumbling. up against my Thane. My Thane is just manhandling this whole ball of spearmen. The Graveguard with great weapons just absolutely levels my guys, and then the rear charge from the Vargeist was devastating. Just kind of keep an eye on the Cryptors are just doing their thing. They are getting a lot of kills up front because of their poison effects, keeping my men damage low. I'm disappointed. Thorgrim, well, I say that. Thorgrim's up against mostly monsters here, so that's why he doesn't have a ton of kills. But again, I brought him just because of the magical damage can be helpful against the vampires. I don't think I've used any healing potions with my Thanes yet. You can see here that the balance of power has swung slightly in my favor. Vargeist hunting down a routing Dwarf Warrior, not a bad idea, because the Dwarf morale, like I said, will usually bring them back over and over again. I've got the Rune of Negation, and every now and then that negates like 40% or so of the damage that my men are receiving, so it's a great way to slow down the damage that your men take. You can use it on the charge as well. White King is getting into the back of my Dwarf Warriors here. Pretty sweet action there. I mean, for the most part, I have several pockets of my infantry that were being defeated, but here my Thane's going to hold down a whole group of Graveguard with great weapons, and because of the potion, you know, this is actually kind of a nice tool for the Dwarves. You can keep whole units held up here long enough to be able to do something about it. So here comes my Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. The White King charging in, saying like, oh no you don't. Comes in and he's not going to let me rear charge that Graveguard. Look at him pounding my guys around. It's pretty awesome. Manfred and the Vargeist are a little bit in trouble. The Vargeist are withering under the Quarreler fire, and they actually bite the dust. And so now Manfred is going to be open to be shot by my Quarrelers, so I'm going to turn around. Flying units, obviously somewhat susceptible to all these ranged units. Thunderers would do even more damage more quickly. But I tend to pick Quarrelers just because their Arc of Fire makes them handy, and they cost considerably less. But Thunderers definitely can be a decent choice. You can see Manfred here and his zombie dragon ripping up dwarves, but I pulled one unit of Quarrelers away so that I'm not blobbed, and while he's trying to finish off those Quarrelers, I can keep firing. Again, up front, normally a lot of units would just rout pretty easily because all I had was Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, and some of them have routed, but with Thorgrim and with my Runesmith buffing the morale and the other stats of the units, I'm able to keep my units in the fight for a significantly long time. So even though all the rest of my infantry routed, I was able to keep Thorgrim and all them there, and it was a fairly close fight. Like, I took considerable losses in my army, but in the end, the vampires just didn't have the hitting power there. And obviously the vampires have a ton of different builds available to them to use against the dwarves, and we'll go take a look at some potentials. Thane's doing pretty well for me. Runesmith was really just more of a support unit here, so not expecting to see a lot of kills out of him. Look at this Dwarf Warrior with great weapon here. 106 kills. It was probably against the Skeleton Spearmen. As expected, none of the rest of my infantry doing supremely well, but look at this, 73 kills on the Miners with blasting charges. The Cannon, 54 kills, and a lot of that was against Blood Knights, so definitely worth it. It limited his Blood Knights significantly. They were only 38 kills in this match. They do have 2 or 3 experience chevrons. I don't know if he picked them that way. The Cryptors gained some experience too, one of them doing a lot of damage. Both Graveguard getting a considerable number of kills, and then Manfred himself getting a decent number of kills, as did the White King. So like I said, I mean, he definitely dealt a lot of losses to me. Out of 900 men, I lost 610 of them, or men, dwarves, I mean. So yeah, I mean, he did a lot of damage. It was a fun battle. It was kind of nice because it wasn't like a general sniping cheese. The battle lasted a little longer because von Karstein nor Thorgrim died until the end of the battle. So the troops stuck around. I definitely kind of enjoyed that one. Let's see what we got here in terms of. And I've been talking a lot about hero spam. And there's some cases where, like, a lot of people are saying, oh, you should just limit the hero type to 1 each. You could do that, but in some cases I disagree. So like for the dwarves, I'm not saying I want to have someone span 6 or 7 Thanes, but a Thane is a very important unit for the dwarf army right now, and it's because it encourages nearby units. If we take a look at it right there, this is very important because the dwarves have such pricey units. A lot of times you find yourself relying on dwarf warriors and miners and all this other stuff, or else you won't have more than like 3 or 4 units in your army. I mean, let's assume for a minute, like, oh, I want to bring my good infantry as the dwarves. All right, let's get a couple of hammers, a couple of iron breakers, and I'll even say, or I gotta have Ungrim Iron Fist, right? Because he's great. And let's see, I need some Thunders. Like, I'm just saying, if I'm using the expensive dwarf units, this is what it gets me. Oh, well, I'm a dwarf. I also have to have some artillery, so let's get a cannon. you're starting to see like the challenges with an army like this. I just don't have hardly any units, and let's say, well, I probably need a hero, I need a runesmith, right? I'm out of money already, and I've only got 4 infantry basically. I mean, I could afford a couple of miners, but like, look how tiny this army is. Yeah, you got 4 really good infantry, but for their price, I don't know if these guys can usually hold out. You can't hardly protect your thunders. You know, if you want heroes and all this other stuff, yes, you can adjust the price of the heroes and all this other stuff. I get it. But I'm just saying that's kind of why I feel like Thanes are important, because the Dwarves are, their units are so expensive that they're pretty much price limited. Like, you can barely bring any of their better units. I mean, sometimes you could mix in maybe a fancy unit or two so that you could, you could do something more like this where you have a little bit of money left over to bring some extra infantry, so you could do something more like that. Of course, you don't have to have the gyros, but it does give you some nice mobility. But yeah, I mean, with the Dwarves, you're definitely always very limited in numbers, and you barely, if at all, have the opportunity to use your elite units. So that's why I'm actually kind of a big fan of the Thane. Right now, at the price point, the Thane can hold up whole units of infantry, and with the potions, of course, it makes it last a little longer. Though, I mean, the Thane's certainly not unkillable. He's not super strong. So the right type of units can cause a lot of damage to him. So I don't see it as being like super abusive as long as it's just a couple of them supporting like cheaper infantry. So I don't know. When we look at like how you may want to limit hero spam, I definitely don't know that like a blanket rule of just limiting each hero to 1 is a great idea. But you know, I don't know. I'm open to see what happens. Let's take a look at the vampire counts real quick too. Post patch. So the Manfred von Karstein that he brought had a lot of spells. I didn't catch which all spells he had, but I mean, he was costing a considerable amount. He got a couple of Graveguard with great weapons, which, you know, I think they're good units. Definitely agree with the pick of the Cryptors. The Skeleton Spears, though, are 75 more. He definitely should have just gone with the regular Skeletons. That would have saved him some money. And then he also brought Blood Knights. And Blood Knights are definitely fantastic infantry, but if you look here, they're fantastic cavalry. They're anti-large. And for the price, they're just definitely overkill. These Black Knights right here are anti-infantry and pretty effective versus Dwarves, and he could bring 2 of them for less than the cost of 1, which is going to give him more mobility. I don't entirely disagree with the use of a White King here either. He could throw in a White King like he did. Again, it helps support the vampire units. No issue with that. But now you see he's got more maneuverability, and he also had a unit of Vargeist. And at this point, you know, I'm looking at what he brought here, and just with those few change-ups, I've still got quite a bit of money left. And I don't know what he did to his White King there either, but I mean, so I've got a ton of money left to help do some damage. This Banshee could be handy. It's an ethereal unit, can definitely get around enemy lines, and it's armor piercing. It causes terror, and against just standard Dwarf warriors, terror is pretty amazing. There are some units, I think, with the Dwarves that are immune to psychology, but some are not. So, I mean, the Banshee could have been a potentially very interesting pick. And honestly, just throwing a bunch of zombies in sometimes is good. These guys are 6,400 hit points that the Dwarves have to tank through, and they can tank a lot of damage for other units like Black Knights and stuff and really help out. So don't underestimate like zombies. And of course, this is just a vampire army, and it's not a fantastic vampire army. It's just I'm building it similar to what my opponent had done, just to show you what, even though his army may not have been like the craziest, most tough vampire pick I've ever seen, I think with a few adjustments that it would have made it extremely difficult for me to beat him. With all this mobility here, with a Black Knight down each flank, it would have been tough. My cannons would have had to try and keep up. The Banshee could have zoomed around the flank or been used to try and help take down my Thanes. And the White King, you know, could focus on a Thane as well. Von Karstein with his flying, of course, along with the Vargeist, should be able to get to ranged units along with the coordination of the Black Knights. I mean, this army is definitely capable of bringing down what I had. To be honest, my Dwarf army here was not built to take on the vampires. I just loaded it quickly because I didn't have a lot of time. So I had this army just sitting around here and I loaded it in. So yeah, I wouldn't say that this army is particularly well suited to go against the vampires, but it does have some flexibility because the Thanes have some survivability, and so does Thorgrim. Though Thorgrim is probably a bit overkill here. You could get a Dwarf warrior, and honestly, one of the cool things about this Dwarf Lord is under his abilities, and you can adjust all these. You can give him this fiery ring of Thori. And this thing does a ton of magical damage if you get it in the right spot, so this could be very handy against vampires, actually. So that's another option. He's just not as survivable as Thorgrim, and that's why I brought Thorgrim. So like if we let's load that army again. So yeah, there's the army, and if you look at the stuff I brought for Thorgrim, I mean, speed and vigor, I just don't care. I did give him the High King ability, which probably might as well turn off, because some people are telling me it doesn't work. I don't know if that's been fixed, but it didn't cost that much. It was only 69 gold, so I was like, whatever, we'll just leave it on there because it's not that big of a difference. And I did give him the Great Book of Grudges, because that +8 melee attack within a 45-meter radius is huge. And then if you'll notice what I did with the Runesmith, he is the most expensive, but I've got all these over here, so I'm getting extra missile resistance, which against the vampires, again, was worthless, so I could have saved money by turning that one off. And then, you know, I've got +8 leadership to everybody within range, and more leadership and melee attack, so the Runesmith can really buff up the enemies if he's kind of standing towards the center of the army, and if you keep him safe, so a very handy unit. And like I said, with Thorgrim, we could have saved the money on that High King, so I've still got some money left up here. If I go through just kind of tweaking what I have, I mean, Deadly Onslaught does give you extra armor piercing damage, which can be handy. But I mean, it's every 90 seconds, lasts for 36 seconds. You could determine, you know, hey, it's not really worth the 151 cost. So if you throw it off, I've now got a Thane with 2 healing potions that's pretty cheap here. And so again, I've saved even more money, and I could even throw a whole nother unit of Dwarf Warriors or Miners with blasting charges. So like this army, ooh, almost, not quite, but yeah. So you can basically tweak this army around, like I said, and you can get some good stuff done with it. Hope y'all enjoyed this. Leave your comments and thoughts. If you were matching up vampires to dwarfs, I mean, obviously, who do you prefer? Do you like taking the underdog? Do you like going with the vampires? What kind of vampire builds do you like for wrecking the dwarves? And what kind of dwarf builds do you like for fighting back against the vampires? HeirofCarthage, signing out. Hope you enjoyed it.